Hi all, let's have a look at another very interesting game from the Norway tournament, Altibox Norway. So this was played in round 4. Anish Giri playing against Viswanathan. C4, the English opening. E5, knight c3. And now the third most popular move is played, bishop b4. We have knight d5, bishop c5. E3, quite often here the move e3 is played, but there's also knight f3, which is interesting. You might think provocative. If e4, d4, and this is thought to be about equal. It's kind of a reverse French defense, in fact. If you look at it, how it could emerge, it looks a little bit like reverse French defense. Yeah, knight f3 is not chosen here. We have e3, knight f6, and now a curious move. Usually here knight c3 is played, just retreating the knight, for example, like this, and we get kind of a reverse, some sort of Sicilian defense in reverse. So basically we have this. It has been played before b4. It looks a little bit quirky to have the double pawns, you might argue. But white has that bishop pair, and the dark square bishop in particular, black hasn't got a counterpart, only a light square bishop. So the game continues like this. d6, which does undouble white's pawns, but black wants to activate his bishop there. So we have c takes, c takes. Now a4, trying to lock down the queen side a bit. b6, d3. We have bishop g4 in this position, h3. And now this is interesting. Maybe, job done. Maybe you could argue job done, and the bishop should actually consider just retreating over here to go back to b7. This might not be entirely bad for black if the bishop ends up on b7, for example. Even if f4, or if f4, that's not particularly well. It might not be particularly dangerous if queen e7. This disposition where black maintains the light square bishop is interesting to consider anyway. Now in the game we see bishop h5, and this allows white to play g4, forcing move, and to try and grab this bishop, so getting both bishops against the two knights. So interesting scenario of imbalances. Both bishops against the knights. Bishop f3. Now there's no e4 here because just in time, if there was e4, there's bishop takes f6, taking out that knight and then taking on e4 with advantage for white. So keeping a lock basically on the light squares, putting some pressure. g5, black's trying to lock down the dark squares here against any potential f4. Bishop retreats as though f4 anyway, and in fact f4 anyway. E takes, sorry, not e takes, g takes is used. E takes. And now here, maybe there's room for some accurate play from black, different from the game. In the game, knight c5 was played, which looks fairly logical to put pressure on d3 to dissuade any f takes. But maybe an annoying sort of move like queen h4 might be better. And this position is slightly different in certain respects. The f7 pawn, which is vulnerable here, potentially, to bishop d5, while black has queen g3. The annoying queen keeps white in a bit of a defensive posture. Now in the game, it's different to that, because after knight c5, in fact, f takes e5 is played, seemingly exposing d3, but only for a moment. After bishop d5 is back, the attention is brought back to f7 now. Now queen f3, yeah, with tempo, hitting c6 and f7. Queen d7, double defending f7 and c6. Bishop c3 against the threats of knight b4. White, ideally in this position, if white's given another move here, it would be great to play g6 for g6 sometimes, or even slower like this, just to cause some dark square weaknesses. This diagonal is pretty dangerous to that bishop. So there's two plans with these pawns, but first, this bishop c3 makes sure knight b4 doesn't harass that most aggressive piece. We see knight e6, rook a e1. Now it looks desperate to do this, knight e7, giving up a whole pawn. But it's not really, it's going to get a4. But the thing is, the queen's out of the way, away from the king. So in a way, it's kind of a desperate measure. But if we look at this position, white has got some very dangerous ideas. Just to show you, say a5, queen f5. I'm just going to show you some token moves for black, what white could end up doing. Could end up threatening mate, causing dark square weaknesses, installing the queen, and then it just crashes through, for example, like that. Yeah, it's all pretty dangerous here with the threat of rook takes e5 here. The dark square weaknesses. The undertone to this is the dark square bishop that black hasn't got a counterpart to. It can be lethal on the diagonal if this is just allowed to evolve for white. So this is kind of interrupting white's natural flow of events if he wanted to get those ideal moves in. So we have this transaction where a centre pawn is lost for a flank pawn. The queen's taken out a potentially defensive zone, but we're still left with this potentially dangerous dark square bishop. Now g5 here, not only sometimes g6 is going to be useful, but basically h4, h5, h6 to try and cause damage on that diagonal. Queen coming in will be mating. Rook c5, h4. This is taken, funny enough, and white takes with the pawn, driving the knight out of that key defensive position, because slight weakness of the last move, f8 is more vulnerable. White pounces now with g6. Yeah, nasty pin on f8. Queen d7 trying to defend, but now another nasty pin, bishop b4 threatening d4, and all of a sudden with these two pins on black, it's a very horrible position. The game actually ended here, but you know, didn't see what to do in this position. It's kind of paralysis. I'll give you an example. Queen d6, we can take here and play d4. The check here is just hopeless. Look at that pin. Yeah, d4 is coming up basically. If a5, we just keep the pin with bishop a3. So it's just a very nasty position to be in. Yep. So the game ended here. A very, very interesting game in some respects, actually, by Anish Giri. So, great game. Pretty instructive. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.